Durk, welcome to SHOWstudios in camera and welcome to our audience. I think this is the first time we've ever done an in camera with a live audience before. Let's start off strong with a question from Jonathan Anderson, who is fashion designer and the creative director of J.W. Anderson and Loewe and has previously collaborated with the Tom of Finland Foundation. Jonathan wants to know, how did you start so young? I think here he's referring to perhaps Tom's early drawings. He started drawing at 5, I think it was.
Well, it could be two things that we're talking about here, is that the artist, Tom of Finland, he actually started to, he was drawing as a child, and he was doing it at 5 years old. We have in our archives original art that is from when Tom was 5 years old, and he was doing comic storybooks and telling stories at that early age, which he had words with it then, and he graduated and gradually learned how to actually communicate completely by the visual art and not by any text. And in regards to me, I actually, I want to say something for illegal immigrants here, because I was an illegal immigrant to the United States when I was 20. And I actually got kicked out of the United States. I'm Canadian born and raised twice. But I knew inside of myself at that early age that I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I was gonna do something that was important. And that within me was strong enough to actually resist what they like shadow banned me. They told me that I couldn't come back into the United States for 5 years. So I found my way and got into the United States before that time. And I found a home, and I was illegal for until I was like 26. And so I was one of those illegals. Even though I didn't come from the South, I came from the North. And because I knew that in the United States, I was going to do something, yeah.
Susanna Lutu from the Tom of Finland Foundation liaison asks, when you met Tom in the late 70s, did you ever in your wildest dreams think that Tom of Finland would become such a worldwide known figure?
I did not know, but what I did know was that I was a tool, and a tool for him who was the gift. And that my job was to actually keep him and put him out in the public arena more than he was already. He'd been doing a fairly good job himself by just following his natural nature, in that he knew that he was going to actually, he had a purpose. And so I just got on board with his purpose and continued, and have continued ever since his passing, to continue to do what he was here to present.
Jaakko, who's the director of the Finnish Institute in the UK and Ireland, similar vein, asks, how did you and Tom meet?
Well, I saw his artwork on the wall of a bar. It was not well reproduced, but it was advertising a motorcycle run for a club, a biker club, a gay biker club in New York City. And what happened to me was I was just gravitated towards his art that was in the poster. And I had never had that experience before. I was so gravitated that I rationalized that was enough reason for me to take it off the wall. And I unpinned it and rolled it up and put it in my sleeve of my leather jacket. And next day, I actually took it, and it was still in my jacket, and I went to a photo shoot that I had won in a contest at another bar, and it was with Target Studios. And who was there but another artist from the gay era, and his name was Etienne. And I showed it to him and said, do you know who this is? who did this? And he said, of course, he's very famous. He's Tom of Finland. And he said, do you like it? And I said, I do like it, but it was more than that. It was something that was so strong in its magnetism that it pulled me towards it. And he said, well, I have his address if you want to write him a letter. And I thought, well, why not? So I wrote Tom a letter. It was a fan letter, but it also was a letter of inquiry, like, what is it about your work that I've never had something speak to me so clearly and so strongly before? And that's how it all began.
Glenn Martens asks, who's the designer at Diesel, he asks, and I don't know, maybe this is an in-joke between the two of you, is naked horse riding a real hobby now?
So where he's getting that is from an artist named Tank. And we have Tank's archives within the foundation. And one of the drawings is, and it's part of the Diesel capsule collection, which is also a sponsor of this exhibition at SHOWstudios. And he had his cowboys naked on the backs of a horse without a saddle. And so both the horse and the rider were naked. And actually, I think that naked people, individuals, both male and female, have been depicted on horses without any saddle and just riding. It's sort of excruciating when I think about it because of the male testicles, but it's at least it's a visionary thing. At least maybe you can pull them up and not get them crushed over and over again. But yeah, I'm sure it's a thing.
Mel Ottenberg, the editor-in-chief of Interview magazine, wants to know, what was Tom into sexually in modern Grindr-esque terms?
Well, what he was into was boots, which is pretty clear when you look at his banyan of work that he did in his lifetime, that boots were definitely something that he had, and he spoke and was interviewed and said, right from the earliest of ages, he talked about getting his first pair of boots, and they were rubber boots, but they were boots, and he would actually sneak them into his bed at night, and his mother would actually repeatedly have to take his arms apart because he was holding these boots in his arms when he fell asleep. And they were very much part of his life in that he was in the military, and boots, he was an officer in the Finnish military, and he got to wear knee-high boots. And they, if you've never worn boots, you wouldn't know this, but if you've worn boots, whether they're female or male, when you walk, there's a certain feel that you have that you're really grounded to the earth, and you have a sense of stature and presence. And that's one of the things that boots do. Yeah.
Mel also asks, of all of Tom's greatest works, is there a standout to you that is most Tom?
Well, actually, it was here in Great Britain. It was shown at Studio Voltaire, and if you were able to go and see that exhibition with Beryl Cook, you would have absolutely noted the presence of this absolute masterpiece. And he did that 3 times, in that he did one in black and white, and that was in the Robert Mapplethorpe collection. And then he did it once again, which actually was sold at auction for $87,000 US last year, and is in the presence of our treasurer, our new treasurer from the foundation's board. And now this piece is owned by the foundation, and it it shows, it's a beautiful drawing because what it does is it shows the anus of the holder, and he's naked and he's holding these boots, and they're surrounding him, and he's inside of this beautiful collection of military boots and riding boots, and he's looking directly at the camera, directly at the camera, directly at the camera. So Tom was able to actually create the viewer no matter where they were standing, and the subject was looking at them.
Benjamin, Tuka and Sini from the community in Paris ask, how did your personal relationship with Tom of Finland influence the direction and mission of the foundation when it was founded in 1984?
So as I said earlier, that I realized that I was a tool for the gift, Tom of Finland. And that was, I was completely, utterly, and still am today, committed to him and to the relationship that he has with the world and the public, to actually foster the continuation of what his love was and what his message was. And I'm so happy, and I definitely am celebrating this weekend being here, because it is a continuation of that commitment and that message that about freedom and about positivity, about the relationship that we all have to our bodies and other people's bodies, in appreciating and enjoying and the pleasure. As Holly Johnson, who we honored this weekend, welcome to the Pleasure Dome, you know, and the power of love. And it's all about positivity. People are always inquiring about, they want to know, how did this relationship and what was the parameters of our relationship? And because I loved him in all facets, we had a sexual relationship, we had, I adored him, and he frustrated me, and because he sometimes was conservative in what we could actually do and accomplish, and I was young, and I had no restrictions, and I really felt that we could do whatever, and pushed for that, and he was on board. In fact, you know, something that people don't know about him is that he was in his 60s, and he indulged in learning how to get high from marijuana, and so he was willing to continue to experiment, and he trusted me so much that when he was nervous about going in front of several thousand men at IML, which is a leather contest in Chicago, I gave him a Quaalude. And he actually took it, and he didn't speak while he was on it, but he absolutely was waving at all of the admiring and acknowledging crowd that was there at that contest.
Edward Buchanan, the designer based in Milan, asked, is there a framework for what is considered homoerotic art?
There was, but that isn't static, in that seems to, just by the nature of what I am evolving and what is evolving around us, is that homoerotic used to mean same-sex sexuality and relating to that, and even defining just male sexuality. But now that window has broadened, and it's including trans men, trans women, and really the celebration and the inclusion of all of them and all of us into what is homoerotic.
Ed also asks, how do you select your artists for the Tom of Finland Foundation residency?
Painfully so, in that we're getting so many applications, but there is a committee that actually reviews and comes together and narrows it down. And we actually have been very fortunate in that the artists that have presented themselves have come from all over the world. We have continents that have not had representation yet, Africa being one, but South America we have, Australia we have, North America, Europe, Asia. We've had artists from Shanghai and Thailand, and so it continues to find, but we only have 12 spaces in the Tom House per year. So we have to find a way to actually exhibit and present all of the applicants, I think, because they're showing their work and they're from, it's like our emerging artist competition that just completed. And our artist who won, Petro, is from Italy but lives in Paris, and he was here receiving his award yesterday. And so we have to find the vehicle, because I think they all deserve to get presentations. Yeah.
Glenn Martens asks another question. He says, you have tattoos. Are any of them a representation from one of the artists included in the foundation? If so, what's the story behind it?
It's old, but it is a Tom of Finland sailor, and holding his crotch inside with his pants up. And I also have well, why not? So I have, this is by Olaf, who is represented in our permanent collection. And so there's two, and I'm wearing, actually, I love this shirt, and I got into a small, which was really not easy today, but it form fits and really shows off the art.
The brand Leather Schmeidel, who are based in Paris, two Swedish designers, Joseph and Andreas, they asked if they were to do a print for one of their collections called Taste the Forbidden Fruit, what Tom of Finland motif would be on it?
Oh, you know what? He was so prolific in that he actually, we have over 3,500 of his works that are documented. We don't have anywhere near that in our physical original collection, but he made sure that his work was as much represented by things that he brought to the foundation for us to document. And I love his preliminary sketches. And so we have over 1,500 of them that have been documented and that are available for presentation. And they are everything from G-rated to X-rated. And I mean, it's so beautiful, because what you get to experience in his preliminary sketches is his process and how he actually came about to have the idea to put something down. So it was his beginning place, yeah.
We've had questions from designers like Glenn and Jonathan, who the foundation has collaborated with. Lias, the fashion commentator, wants to know, how do you choose the brands that you collaborate with? Is it hard for the foundation to preserve the estate while having to make an income?
Well, those are two different questions. And so there's something that is sort of natural in the process of how we actually developed these relationships in that they tend to come to us. It's not about solicitation, it's something much more organic in that the relationship seems to evolve. It's like meeting someone that you have a bond with. These friendships are organic, and you just sort of tend to meet, and you have this attraction, and so it ends up turning into a relationship that has these capsule collections. Tom and I didn't think about the financial needs that were going to be required to actually keep a foundation operating. We had the vision, and we actually created the format for that, but we didn't really figure out how we were going to actually support it. And so some people have criticized me for actually commercializing Tom's art when it is fine art and shouldn't be actually put in that context. But I have been figuring out all the way along how to keep things going and how to actually, it turns out that the commercial aspect of his art and other artists actually is become a vehicle for them to be known in the world. Where magazines and print material have been the vehicle in previous times and even present times, now fashion meets art, and the two actually have been going on together. So it's very difficult for us to financially support and keep our doors open and keep our programs going. But through tenacity, and we have been able to do it so far, but we really need, because we don't get any government support and we don't get any, it's hard for us to get funding from philanthropic organizations because of our subject matter. And so even though Tom is in the Museum of Modern Art in New York and in multiple other facilities, it still is not easy. And so we really need the private sector to help us by membership and by donating to us, yeah.
Russell Tovey and Robert Diamond from Talk Art London ask, do you believe in love?
You know, I am so fortunate. I'm one of the most fortunate people to, because what I was able to do is create a profession that I was able to actually make my life's work, and it's all based about love. Because it's really about being able to be around artists and the public who celebrate and are hungry for and are nurtured by the expressions of art, of sexual art, and it's a love affair. And what happens, and I really encourage people to become collectors of art, and especially art that speaks to you, and if it's sexual in its nature, to be proud of it and to enjoy it, because it continues to feed you throughout your life, and it doesn't stop doing that. It doesn't have an age parameter on it. It really just lets you continue to be. And you know what, when I look at art and I go out into the world like I am now, I'm so proud.
Simon Foxton, the stylist, wants to know, putting Tom's amazing work and his love of masculine beauty to one side, what other things was Tom passionate about? Films, books, art, food, whatever. I'd be so interested to know something of that unseen private side to him.
It isn't really totally private in that he was a composer, in that he composed music. He went to the Sibelius School of Art in Finland, and he played the piano. He was in a jazz quartet that played at the Palace Hotel in Helsinki in the evenings, and he composed choral music. He was the first to create a military men's choir in Finland, and he actually was the conductor for them. He composed choral music, and it's in Finnish, and he was very, his family was, his father was a choir master, and both his father and mother were teachers, and so he was surrounded by education and by the arts. And so it's pretty natural that he actually was nurtured to draw. He had crayons and everything around him as a young child so that he could actually foster that natural ability. In fact, I've spoken to quite a few parents who actually are the parents of artists. They all nurtured their children by supplying them with drawing and music and the creative fields. So if they grow up with that, especially when they're young, their chances of actually using that as a vehicle to communicate is so much greater. So if there's parents who are watching this, remember that.
Sharp, who of course is the Tom of Finland Chief Experience Officer, he asks, what was yours and Tom's relationship with the ghost in Tom House? Maybe you can also explain to people who don't know what Tom House is as well.
Oh, he's more than that.
Okay,
Sharp
what else?
We want to talk about love. He's my partner. He's my life partner, and he came into my life long after Tom was passed, but not long, but he's been in my life for 25 years. And talk about love, in that how rare is it that, it's rare, it happens, but that a partner will come into one's life and he will take on that passion that you have and make it his own. And he has taken that and made the foundation his passion. And I'm so fortunate. I mean, it's so rare to actually have a partner take that on as their own, and he did. So Tom House is the house, the physical house that Sharp and I live in, and the artists in residence come and live in. And Tom lived in with him and I and other roommates at that time. And it's a 3-story house, and there is a ghost. And I don't want to define what a ghost is, except it's an energy that actually takes some form and presents itself and is present in environments. And I didn't want to believe, and so I have a saying, do not believe in anything until you experience it yourself. And then you can talk about it as something that is real for you. And so we were having experiences in the house. People were hearing people move around on different floors, and there was no one else home but them. And I ended up seeing one time only a physical manifestation go across the room. But before that, a young woman came and knocked at our door, and she said, you know, my grandmother used to own this house. And she said, could I have a walk around? And I said, sure. I said, it's Erotic Art Foundation now for queer art, but she said, that's fine. And so as we're walking, she said to me, by the way, have you experienced a ghost here? And I said, well, actually, yes. And you're a validating force now telling us this. She said, well, my mother and my grandmother used to call him Harold. and he would make himself known to them. And so I confessed, and that our pets and I and other people had experienced Harold in forms, and so how he would appear with Tom is he would watch Tom draw, and he would breathe on the back of Tom's neck, and he could feel him that close to him, and the air would brush on Tom's back of his neck. But I do know something, that we're not using all of our gifts, and our gifts are actually, we can actually experience telepathy, and we can experience entities, and my father came to me when he passed, and I didn't know he'd passed, and he communicated to me, and I said, "What happens to you after you leave?" And he said, "I just become part of the cosmos again. I demolecularize and become part of the whole. It doesn't matter what, that's mine. I own that, and but that's not yours. So just remember, be open, and don't believe anything unless you experience it yourself."
Willie Chevalier, the designer based in New York, asks, "I often see references of Tom of Finland in my own work, a glorification of queer masculinity as part of my storytelling. Are there any archetypes of masculinity in 2024 that you could interpret into Tom of Finland?"
Wow. Yes, actually, if he had been living in Southern California longer, the whole Hispanic presence, which is so dominant now in the leather culture of Southern California, he would have absolutely been drawing them. If Tom had been around when the presence of so many Asian artists are present at the Tom House, he would have been drawing them. He loved masculinity. He loved the male body. He was really like Leonardo or like Michelangelo in that he adored the male form. And so that what he was expressing was the admiration. I'll tell you a short story, and it's not part of the questions, but during the war, he ended up having to stab in the back a Russian paratrooper. And he had to run back to his base because that Russian paratrooper was a scout trying to actually get information on where the Finnish army was. So what happened was Russia was going to invade Finland, just like they did in the Ukraine. And so he had to run back to his post and communicate that they were coming. But he went back at sunrise, and he turned that Russian paratrooper over, and he saw that he was such a beautiful, handsome young male that he just broke down and wept on his chest for like 5 minutes. And he told me this personally one time, and I've only known him to tell anyone else this story one time. So he kept it very close to his heart. And so I'm telling you this because that was the level at which he admired, worshipped, adored. I think adored is a good word for him, the male form.
David Martens, the founder of Oda magazine, asked, "How do you believe Tom would express himself in 2024, and how society will perceive his liberation and support to the community?"
So what he was doing way back then, and he was doing it all the way through his career, was presenting male sexuality and the power. I mean, I have heard it, well, not thousands of times, but probably for sure hundreds of times, where admirers will come and tell me how they discovered Tom and what he did for them. And it's universal. It's within. You don't have to actually be black or white to actually appreciate Tom's identification. You can be female. You can be trans. The message is clear, and it's about positivity and about appreciation for who you are and celebrating your sexuality. And his messaging would continue to actually transpose itself to present day time.
I feel you may have just answered the next question, but I'll ask it anyway. It's from the designer Per Gattesen and his partner, the artist Husam El-Oda. And they asked, how do you make sense of the hypermasculine and other stereotypes so prevalent in Tom of Finland within current culture and fashion?
Yes. Sometimes I have to actually point out that don't forget to receive the message. So what he was doing is the vehicle where he was communicating the message was hypermasculinity, because when he started that was an area where we were actually not given privy to, in that homosexuals were not allowed to be expressed with masculinity, because they were actually categorized and held within a certain stereotype. And what he wanted to do was break that stereotype by expressing it through a vehicle of masculinity. And it was easy for him because he already appreciated that, and he wanted it to be open to homosexuals to actually identify. And so you have to look, though, if like the same thing that happened to me, it's happened to trans men and trans women, in that they have found the identification within the work. And so like art speaks to you, you have to look within the art to actually get the message.
Nicola Formichetti, the stylist, designer and creative director, asks, do you feel like there has been significant progress in terms of LGBTQ+ rights and representation in art, or do the same barriers still exist?
Well, barriers do still exist, and it's good that they do, because what happens is that it pushes the artist all the more to actually express what is there for them to actually, their message. And how they express that message is fundamental to that. There's always new barriers and new hurdles to actually surmount. And it's good that they're there, because it creates the angst that artists need to actually to do their expression.
Nicola also asks if you have any advice that you'd give to artists working today trying to push those boundaries like Tom did.
Well, the one thing that I want to say is that here is one artist who actually stayed steadfast to what his mission was and his message, and he actually made it his life work, and he was able to see it impact and actually produce results on the other side. And so I say use him as a model, use him as a vehicle to stay steadfast to what you're committed to, and don't give up. And even when you get slammed and people don't appreciate who you are, that he went through all of that, and when he got discouraged, when people ripped him off and did bad things, he actually wanted to give up for the day, but tomorrow would come and he would again rally to something within him would speak to him, and he would actually get back to his drawing board. Yeah, so don't give up.
Benjamin Pontinen, Tuka and Sini, again from the community in Paris, ask another question. They want to know how you think the cultural reception of Tom of Finland's work has shifted from the 1980s until today.
So it is interesting. in that we started our mail order company, and this man had a mail order company, and this is what he had to do. He had to do his drawing, he had to photograph it, he had to then take that film into his own dark room, learn how to make prints. He would have to make prints. They couldn't be larger than this size, and he would make the prints. And what he did is he built his own catalog on like 4 little pieces of photo paper, and he'd have maybe 30 different images on all those, on the 4, and he would mail that to people who would inquire. They would then have to send that back to him, and he would have to make prints of each individual one that they were going to buy, and then he would mail that to them. And then what he would do is he would burn their letter so that there would be no evidence of who they were, and he would protect them that way. Can you imagine having an archive and he was still burning letters because he knew that maybe times would change and he wanted to protect his customers? But he went through that whole process committed to, I mean, there was no money that was being made there, pennies, but he was so committed to the process of communicating and sharing what his art was and sharing the message that he had, that how could I not fall in love with somebody like that, you know? He had such a steadfast commitment. And so I don't know where the question was, but that's where we went.
Nick Knight, founder of SHOWstudio and image maker, asks, has society's attitude gone full circle, and are they now censoring things more than ever, even when Tom of Finland first started? Which I guess comes into the subject of this show.
He was illegal. What he was doing was illegal, and using the post to mail it through was absolutely illegal. The reason why he made them so small, and I didn't tell you that earlier, was that was the size of a postal airplane envelope, and this size. So it had to fit within that envelope because customs would not open a letter, but they would open up anything that was larger than a letter size. And so he had to circumvent that. He had to be subversive and find a way through that whole illegal situation. And so now what we have is again, illegal situations coming up in the sense of shadow banning. And we have to find a way through that. And we haven't found it yet, but it has to, I think it has to be under the radar, and we have to actually circumvent, we have to find, we're smart, we can figure this out. We can come up with ways to actually circumvent the censoring that's happening. And we're going into a more censoring era. I'm afraid that our freedom of expression is being suppressed again. And so we have to find ways to actually circumvent that. Yeah.
Again, another question's come in that I think you've just answered, but I just want to mention it, from Jordan and Luca behind the London brand. And they were asking, do you think that the revival of Tom of Finland is purely nostalgia, or do you think it's a conversation that we need to be having now, which I suppose you've just answered, really?
Yes, because it's not nostalgia. I think that he as a messenger is going to be relevant as long as the message is still being received and valued. I mean, it's the epitome of subversive. If you can actually communicate a message and hide it within something that outsiders will look as superficial, and so it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, thinking about that legacy, Joe Scotland, who's the director of Studio Voltaire, says, having recently collaborated with the Foundation on our recent Beryl Cook Tom of Finland exhibition, one of the things I found most interesting was the changing perception and relevance of Tom's legacy through different political and social periods. How do you envisage Tom's legacy in the years to come?
Yes, and I think we have answered it in that he'll be relevant as long as the message is poignant, and so it's not queers don't have equality, and we will continue to actually fight for ourselves and fight for our brothers and sisters in countries where, in fact, they're being brutalized, and that happens here in Britain, and it happens in the United States, and it will continue to happen by ill-informed and ignorant and people, as Daniel said today earlier, self-hate, in that when you hate who you are, you will actually try to take that out on others who bring that up for you.
Melita Baumeister, the designer based in New York, says, could you elaborate on the ways that you see new generations carrying on and developing the worldview that Tom has impacted so much?
I'll just share stories because they're so. In regards to the issue of trans men, I was involved in my leather culture, and I'm still very proud of it, and I love the masculinity that is identified with leather culture, and so when the first IML winner, this is the International Mr. Leather Contest in Chicago, was a trans man, I was sort of offended, and I couldn't. I felt like my own backyard had been sort of broken into, and I didn't have a safe space. And then what happened was that trans men started coming to the foundation, and I could witness them being empowered by Tom's art, and how they would take from it and self-identify and become richer for it. And then I started to experience that with trans women, and that I realized, and that heterosexual women who were coming. And so I realized that this kind of narrow-minded kind of identification was, in fact, it needed to evolve, and I was evolving. I was an example of evolution taking its place and taking place, and so I realized that, wow, he belongs to everyone, and absolutely, if you identify in whatever form and whatever outer garments that you connect with, it's yours. You know, you have to. I realized that I took ownership, and you get to take ownership.
We had a question from the public that I want to pose to you because you've just mentioned the leather community. Obedient Son asks, has the leather community gone mainstream, and if so, what are your thoughts on it crossing over?
Yeah, you know what that brings up for me, and this is, it's important to me, and it's also, I think, relevant in that, well, actually, now my mind is going onward. I want to tell you a story about the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 2006. So this is 24, and that's sort of a while ago, but it seems like yesterday to me. But they were gifted by the Judith Rothschild Trust 1,500 works on paper by artists that were outsiders and who had not been really collected by museums in any dominant form. And one of them, there was 5 or 6 Tom of Finlands in that 1,500, and one of them was a work of 2 construction workers and a police, a cop, and they were all embraced in kissing, and one was the policeman was getting fisted, and that was the no-no. That was the place where it was not acceptable within the culture of the museum that they would accept that work. It was too much over the edge. And so they told us, they told the Judith Rothschild Trust to remove it, otherwise the whole gift was in jeopardy. And so they did. And so that told us where society was on a museum level in 2006. I don't know where they'd be today because they haven't been put in that position to actually answer that. But they need to. They need to actually see that, because yesterday Guy Birch and I were having a conversation here and with the public, and it had to do with what is the definition of obscenity, and very many governments use it has to be the man on the street, the average bloke, and what they would hold as obscene, and that's what the definition is, and that's very common. In fact, in Canada, I got held back by customs because they wanted to look at my laptop, and they found material on there, and they confiscated my laptop, and they said they were going to send it to the headquarters for the RCMP in Ottawa because there was material on my laptop where people were having sex with unhappy faces. And I said to them, the customs officer, I said, "You must be kidding. I mean, this is the 21st century." And they said, "Well, it's still our law that you can't import that material and bring it into the country. And that law goes back to the 1800s. So we have to really be on the lookout and really push the limits, because it really will affect not just the art, but it will affect our personal lives. And so we have to actually be constant in that vigilance.
Nicola Formichetti asks another question. What do you think Tom would think of today's social media craziness, and what do you think about it? Social media as kind of a platform.
The number of artists that are being shadow banned and the number of individuals and organizations, the Tom of Finland Foundation gets shadow banned a lot. And so what happens is you think that your work is being presented and shown when in fact it's not. And it's about money. It's about money talks. And so if people go away, look what happened with Tumblr, in that they decided to put in restraints and restrictions, and it went to nothing. And people moved on to Instagram. And so it tells us what people want. And so governments have to actually be held in account for this. And the the MPs and the senators and all of them need to be held in accord that they are actually interfering. And look at what's happening in the United States. It's absolutely obscene what's happening as far as what the Republican Party is trying to inflict on its citizens, the citizens of America. I realize I'm just saying the same thing over and over, and I hope that it's resonating within all of you, because it ends up being that I thought that this conversation was going to be embarrassing, and what's happened is that it's ended up being about the fight, and that we actually, we think that we're going to have an entertaining conversation, and what it ends up being is about the fight. And that we can't, that each of us has a responsibility to actually, if we want a world that is at least sane, that we have to actually do that fight.
I want to ask you a couple of more questions before we finish. Richard Villani, the creative director of the Tom of Finland Foundation, firstly asks, am I your favourite? And secondly asks, do you feel accomplished in Tom's place in the world?
You are my favorite. And actually, I think what's happening with you, Richard Villani, is that you're discovering that you are your own favorite. And that's very, very rewarding for me, because you've been my own little project. Not really project, but I've wanted to influence you, and I have, and you're out in the world now, and you're actually representing yourself, and you're representing the Tom of Finland Foundation in high accord. And I'm very honored to have you as a partner in that. And I do feel, when you actually, I'll share something else, because they didn't ask it. And it has to do with ego. In that I was growing up and young adult and doing Tom's work. I mean, I actually wanted to kill myself when I was younger. Because I couldn't find a purpose. And I thought my whole physiology, as far as my DNA, I think that suicide has been part of the mechanism that is just part of my DNA, because my mother was very depressed. But where I'm going with this is that I just needed to find a purpose. And when I found that purpose, and that was communicating, for the longest time, I realized that my ego, where's my ego in all of this? And I realized that my ego was always present. And what I was doing was I was communicating a message, Tom's message, throughout, and the message of the foundation, and it became my message, and that, and there was no other message, and that they merged together, and that my ego was absolutely present and healthy, and maybe I came in through the back door, but my ego is very much being celebrated through the message. And so I feel I could pass tomorrow. I actually didn't think, I saw my whole life in front of me when I was 20 years old. That's when my father came to me and showed it to me when he was passing. And he showed me my whole life. And I went, wow. I said, how can you do this? And he said, when you die, you actually have access to these gifts, and you can show them, you can share them. And so it only went to 74. So last year, I'm 75 now, last year I was really apprehensive, like, is it gonna be a car? Am I gonna have a heart attack? How is it gonna end? I got more to do. Oh, well, so what? So much for that. And then I turned 75. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to rethink all of this. And so I've decided, since I'm healthy, that I'll stick around for another decade and see what I can do. And but if I pass tomorrow, it would be fine.
That leads me really beautifully on to a final question from Sharp. Is there a better place we go to after we die? Does it look like a Tom of Finland drawing?
Well, you know what? I've interpreted where Tom went by looking at his preliminary drawings for the last 6 years of his life. And there was a story within those drawings. They were all different scenarios, but there was a story, and it was about all of his men from all of his expressions all coming together for a party. And a party where they all were celebrating and enjoying their sexuality and enjoying each other. And he was always an equalizer. I don't know if that's another message that he had in his work, was that he made sure that all the participants got satisfied. And so he was very much equalitarian, as also being subversive and putting sexuality at forefront. That I realized that where he went there. He went to that place in his own experience of being with all of his men, because he spent so much time there. And artists are so amazing in that they are not just in a technical world, they're in a world where they actually transcend and allow themselves to be in altered spaces and head spaces. And I would notice that he would actually go to another realm and be there. And actually, when he was there, he could actually execute his work remarkably fast and without any corrections. And I mean, people used to think that he actually would trace his preliminary drawings, and that's how he would actually outline. He just would look at it up in the upper corner of his desk, and he would be able to articulate his finished work without any errors. So where I go and where he goes, I don't know. I certainly don't want to remember. Don't believe anything unless you experience it yourself. And that's my whole motto for life. But be open and be willing. Like, life's experiences is like trying on different coats. And the coats that fit you, you'll keep, and they'll become part of you. And the coats that don't fit you, they'll just go away. But be open to trying on those new experiences.
Thank you so much, Durk, for joining us, and thank you to our audience as well.